The clock on the dashboard read 11:47 p.m. when Marcus Sullivan finally pulled his beat-up Honda Civic into the apartment complex parking lot. His body ached from 14 straight hours of work, 8 hours driving for a rideshare company, followed by 6 hours of security duty at a warehouse in Brooklyn. Every muscle screamed for rest as he climbed the 3 flights of stairs to the apartment he shared with his wife, Jessica. He fumbled with his keys, noting that the living room light was still on. Jessica usually went to bed by 10. The door swung open, and Marcus froze. Jessica stood in the middle of their modest Queens apartment, dressed in an outfit he'd never seen before. A sleek black dress that probably cost more than their monthly rent hugged her figure. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled like she'd just stepped out of a salon. On the coffee table sat a designer handbag with a gold logo that Marcus definitely hadn't bought her. "Hey," he said cautiously, setting down his keys. "You look nice. Did you have an event tonight?" Jessica turned to face him, her expression cold and distant. "Marcus, I can't do this anymore." The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Marcus's exhaustion suddenly felt secondary to the ice spreading through his chest. "Can't do what?" "This. Us. This pathetic life." She gestured around their small apartment with unconcealed disgust. The one-bedroom place wasn't fancy, but Marcus had worked hard to keep it clean and comfortable. They had furniture, appliances, and everything they needed. To him, it was home. To Jessica, apparently, it was a prison. "I'm 30 years old, Marcus," she continued, her voice rising. "I should be living in Manhattan, shopping at Bergdorf Goodman, dining at Le Bernardin. Instead, I'm stuck in Queens with a husband who smells like a taxicab and comes home exhausted every single night." Before we go further, I would like to know where you all watching this from? And what's the weather like for you today? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know. And please, if you want to see what happens to Marcus, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. It's the only way to make sure you don't miss the next chapter. Marcus felt his heart crack. He'd known Jessica was unhappy lately, but he thought it was just stress. He'd been working double shifts for months, trying to save money for the fashion boutique she dreamed of opening. Every dollar he earned went toward their future together, or so he believed. "Jess, you knew what you were getting into when we married," he said quietly, his voice heavy with hurt. "I'm working hard to build something for us. The boutique you want, the life you dream of. I'm trying to make it happen." "Build what?" She laughed bitterly. "We have nothing. My friends are married to doctors, lawyers, investment bankers. Sarah's husband just bought her a BMW. Melissa's husband takes her to the Caribbean every winter. Meanwhile, I have to lie to people about what you do because I'm too embarrassed to admit my husband drives an Uber. I also work security." "Oh, that's so much better," she sneered. "A security guard. My parents must be so proud." Marcus's hands clenched in a fist at his sides, not from anger, but from the effort of holding himself together. "What are you saying, Jessica?" Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, and her expression immediately softened, but not for him. A small smile played at her lips as she read the message. When she looked back at Marcus, her eyes were hard again. "I'm saying I met someone else. Someone who can actually give me the life I deserve." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The room seemed to tilt, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. You're cheating on me?" "Don't be so dramatic," Jessica said, picking up her handbag. "Derek and I have been seeing each other for 3 months. He's a senior executive at Morrison Media Group. He has a penthouse in Tribeca, drives a Tesla, and actually has a future." She slung the bag over her shoulder. "I want to divorce Marcus. Derek's lawyer will send you the papers." Derek Morrison. The name sparked recognition in Marcus's mind. Derek Morrison was the son of Christopher Morrison, a minor media mogul who'd built his modest empire on celebrity gossip and trending scandals. The Morrison family was worth maybe $200 million. Impressive to ordinary people, but pocket change compared to Marcus's real legacy. "Yes, Derek Morrison," Jessica confirmed, her chin lifted with pride. "And before you try to guilt me about leaving, just know that you were never enough. Derek showed me what real success looks like. He showed me what it means to be with someone who matters." She walked to the door, Her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Marcus had spent a weekend refinishing himself. Then she turned back, and the cruelty in her smile made her look like a stranger. "Oh, and I'm keeping everything we bought together. You paid for it with your pathetic paychecks, but I earned it by wasting 5 years on you. Consider it compensation for my time." The door slammed shut, leaving Marcus alone in the apartment. The silence was deafening. He stood motionless for several minutes, processing what had just happened. 5 years of marriage, gone in a matter of minutes. 5 years of supporting her dreams, loving her, believing in their partnership. All of it meant nothing. Marcus walked slowly to their bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. He looked around at the life they'd built together. The framed photo of their wedding day on the nightstand. The bookshelf he'd assembled. The curtains Jessica had picked out. None of it mattered anymore. For the first time in 5 years, Marcus reached under the bed and pulled out a small lockbox hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Inside was a phone he hadn't touched since the day he'd married Jessica. A phone given to him by his grandfather with strict instructions not to use it until the 5-year test was complete. Marcus turned on the phone. It took a moment to boot up, and then the screen illuminated with a single contact. Grandfather. He made a deal 5 years ago. His grandfather, Richard Sullivan, had presented him with a challenge. Live as an ordinary man for 5 years. No family wealth, no Sullivan name, no privileges. Work real jobs, pay real bills, and build real relationships. Only then would Marcus truly understand the value of character over wealth. And only then would he be worthy of inheriting the Sullivan empire. Marcus had agreed, believing it would make him a better man and a better leader. He'd also hoped it would help him find genuine love, someone who would love him for who he was, not what he had. Jessica had proven exactly why his grandfather insisted on the test. Marcus stared at the phone for a long moment, thinking about everything he'd learned in the past 5 years. He'd learned the value of hard work. He'd learned humility. He'd learned that most people judged worth by wealth rather than character. And tonight, he'd learned the most painful lesson of all. His wife had never truly loved him. The 5-year test was complete. It was time to come home. Marcus pressed the call button. The phone rang once before a familiar voice answered. "Marcus, grandfather," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "The 5 years are up. I'm coming home." There was a pause, then a deep sigh on the other end. "I'll send the car. It will be there in 30 minutes. Marcus hung up and looked around the apartment one last time. He didn't bother packing much, just a single bag with a few changes of clothes and some personal items. Everything else could stay. It was all part of a life that no longer existed. As he waited for the car, Marcus thought about Jessica and Derek Morrison. They had no idea what was coming. Jessica thought she'd upgraded from a poor taxi driver to a wealthy executive. She had no clue that she'd actually downgraded from a billionaire heir to someone who was barely wealthy by comparison. The irony would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. A text came through on the phone. "Car is downstairs." Marcus took one last look around the apartment, turned off the lights, and walked out the door. He didn't look back. His old life was over. His real life was about to begin. The drive from Queens to the Hamptons took 90 minutes in the middle of the night. Marcus sat in the back of the black Mercedes S-Class, watching the city lights give way to darkness and then to the manicured estates of Long Island's most exclusive enclave. James, the Sullivan family's driver for the past 20 years, glanced at Marcus in the rearview mirror. "Good to have you back, Mr. Sullivan." "Thanks, James," Marcus replied. "Good to be back." When the car finally turned through the iron gates of the Sullivan estate, Marcus felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, regret, but also, strangely, freedom. The mansion rose before him, illuminated by landscape lighting that made it look like something from a dream. 15 acres of prime waterfront property, a main house with 20 rooms, a guest house, a pool house, tennis courts, and private beach access. Marcus had grown up here, but after 5 years in a 600-square-foot apartment in Queens, the scale felt almost overwhelming. A butler, Thomas, who'd been with the family since Marcus was a child, opened the door as the car pulled up. "Welcome home, Master Marcus." "Just Marcus is fine, Thomas," he said, climbing out. "I think I've had enough of pretending for a while." Thomas smiled knowingly. Your grandfather is waiting for you in the breakfast room. He's been up since he received your call. Marcus walked through the familiar halls, his footsteps echoing on marble floors. Oil paintings of Sullivan ancestors lined the walls. Generations of successful businessmen and women who'd built the empire he was about to inherit. The weight of that legacy had always intimidated him, which was partly why he'd agreed to his grandfather's test. He'd wanted to prove he was worthy of the Sullivan name. He found his grandfather, Richard Sullivan, sitting at the table in the glass-walled breakfast room overlooking the ocean. Despite the late hour, it was nearly 2 a.m., Richard was dressed in a crisp shirt and slacks, sipping coffee as if it were a perfectly normal time for breakfast. Marcus! Richard stood, and for the first time in 5 years, Marcus embraced his grandfather properly. The old man was 74 now, his hair silver white and his face lined with age, but his eyes were as sharp and clear as ever. Sit, Richard commanded, and Marcus obeyed. A member of the kitchen staff immediately appeared with a cup of coffee for Marcus, prepared exactly how he liked it, with 2 sugars and a splash of cream. Some things never changed. So she left you for the Morrison boy, Richard said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And she has no idea who you really are? None. I kept my word. I told no one. Richard nodded approvingly, studying his grandson's face. Good. You've learned what you needed to learn, Marcus. Most people only love wealth, not the person behind it. Your ex-wife just proved that principle rather spectacularly. Marcus took a sip of coffee, letting the familiar taste ground him. She said I was never enough, that I didn't matter. And what do you think? I think she's right in a way. The Marcus Sullivan she married, the one who drove a rideshare and worked security, that man didn't matter to her. She wanted someone who could give her status, luxury, and bragging rights to her friends. I couldn't provide those things, so I wasn't enough. Marcus met his grandfather's eyes, but I also think that says more about her than it does about me. A smile crossed Richard's weathered face. Excellent. You understand the lesson. He reached beside his chair and pulled out a black leather folder, sliding it across the table to Marcus. These are the papers to officially reinstate you as heir. Sign them, and everything becomes yours. The company, the properties, the investment portfolios, the offshore accounts. All $8.2 billion of it. Marcus stared at the folder, but didn't open it immediately. $8.2 billion. A fortune that had taken 5 generations to build. The Sullivan Empire included real estate holdings across the East Coast, a venture capital firm, a private equity fund, and stakes in dozens of successful companies. It was more money than most people could comprehend. There's something I want to do first, Marcus said slowly. Oh, I want to go back. I want to return to New York City as myself. As Marcus Sullivan, CEO of Sullivan Enterprises. I want to take over the Manhattan real estate division and start making my mark. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But I don't want Jessica to know immediately. I want to see what she does when she realizes what she gave up. Richard's smile widened. Revenge. No, Marcus said honestly. Not revenge. Just truth. I want to live authentically for the first time in 5 years. I want to see if I can build something meaningful without hiding who I am. And if Jessica happens to be there to witness it. He shrugged. That's just a side benefit. You've learned more than I thought you would, Richard said, clearly pleased. Very well. Consider it done. I'll have the legal team prepare everything. You'll take over as CEO of the Manhattan division by the end of the week. I'll make some calls, get you on the right guest lists, ensure you're properly welcomed back into society. He pushed the folder closer. But first, sign these papers. It's time to make it official. Marcus opened the folder. Inside were dozens of documents, transfer of ownership papers, corporate bylaws, investment portfolio statements. He found a pen and began signing, each signature feeling like a door opening to his future and closing on his past. When he finished, Richard called for champagne. Thomas appeared with a bottle of Dom Perignon and 2 crystal flutes. To Marcus Sullivan, Richard said, raising his glass, may you build an empire even greater than the one you're inheriting. And may you do it with the character and wisdom you've gained. They clinked glasses, and Marcus drank, feeling the expensive champagne burn pleasantly down his throat. It tasted different from the cheap beer he'd been drinking for 5 years. Better, certainly, but also bittersweet. "You did well, my boy," Richard said quietly. "I know it was hard. I know you wanted to tell her the truth 1,000 times. But you passed the test. You learned what kind of person Jessica really was. Better to learn now than after you'd given her access to the family fortune." Marcus nodded. "I kept hoping she'd love me anyway, that the money wouldn't matter. It always matters to people like her. That's why the test exists." Richard refilled their glasses. "Now, tell me about your plans for the Manhattan division." They talked until sunrise, discussing business strategies and investment opportunities. Marcus's 5 years of working odd jobs had given him insights into markets and demographics that most billionaires never bothered to understand. He had ideas for affordable housing developments that could still be profitable. He wanted to invest in small businesses and startups that showed promise. He wanted to build things that mattered, not just things that made money. Richard listened, occasionally asking questions, clearly impressed by his grandson's vision. As the sun rose over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Marcus felt something shift inside him. The pain of Jessica's betrayal was still there, but it was overshadowed by something else: anticipation. For 5 years, he'd been living as someone else. Now, finally, he could be himself. "There's one more thing," Richard said as they finished their second bottle of champagne. "I've already scheduled meetings with several of my contacts in Manhattan. Business leaders, politicians, philanthropists. They'll want to meet you, assess you, decide if you're worthy of the Sullivan name." He paused. "There's also a charity gala at the plaza next Friday. I've secured you an invitation. It's exactly the kind of event where you need to be seen." "Who else will be there?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. "Everyone who matters in New York society," Richard replied with a knowing look. "Including, I imagine, the Morrisons. Derek Morrison has been trying to climb the social ladder for years. He'll definitely be there with whatever trophy girlfriend he's currently parading around." Marcus smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was determined. "Perfect. You're not going to do anything foolish, are you?" Richard asked. "No," Marcus assured him. "I'm just going to be myself. That should be enough." He spent the rest of that day reacquainting himself with luxury. He took a long shower in his childhood bathroom, using products that actually smelled good instead of the cheap body wash he'd been buying at the dollar store. He slept in a bed with Egyptian cotton sheets instead of the scratchy polyester blend from Jessica's favorite discount store. He ate food prepared by an actual chef instead of ramen noodles and frozen dinners. But as comfortable as it all was, Marcus found himself thinking about the past 5 years. Despite the hardship, despite Jessica's betrayal, he didn't completely regret the experience. He learned things about himself and the world that he never would have learned growing up in wealth. He'd learned empathy for people struggling to make ends meet. He'd learned the value of a dollar earned through hard work. He'd learned that character mattered more than status. Those lessons would stay with him forever. By Monday morning, Marcus Sullivan was ready to reclaim his place in the world. The 5-year test was over. The real test, building a meaningful life and legacy, was just beginning. And if Jessica happened to be watching when he did it, well, that was just karma. The Sullivan Enterprises building rose 62 stories above Manhattan's financial district, its glass and steel facade reflecting the morning sun like a beacon. Marcus stood on the sidewalk for a moment, coffee in hand, looking up at the building that now belonged to him. "Ready, sir." Claire Rodriguez, his newly assigned executive assistant, stood beside him with a tablet in her hands. She was 34, sharp as a knife, and had been managing high-level executives for the Sullivan Empire for the past decade. Richard had personally recommended her. "Let's do this," Marcus said. The lobby was impressive, all marble and modern art, with the Sullivan Enterprises logo prominently displayed behind a reception desk. Employees hurried past, none of them giving Marcus a second glance. Why would they? As far as they knew, he was just another businessman in a suit. But that was about to change. Claire led him to a private elevator that went directly to the executive floor. When the doors opened, Marcus stepped into a different world. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Manhattan. The reception area featured expensive furniture and original artwork. Everything screamed success and power. The executive team is waiting in the conference room, Claire informed him. Your grandfather called ahead. They know you're taking over as CEO of the Manhattan division. Marcus nodded and followed her down a corridor lined with offices. Through the glass walls, he could see people working, making calls, typing at computers. This was his responsibility now. All these people, their jobs, their livelihoods. The conference room held 12 people, all rising to their feet as Marcus entered. These were the top executives of the Manhattan division. Vice presidents of development, finance, marketing, legal, and operations. Combined, they had over 200 years of experience in real estate and investment. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, taking his place at the head of the table. I'm Marcus Sullivan. As of today, I'm your CEO. Over the next 3 hours, he met with each executive individually, learning about their departments, understanding the challenges they faced, and absorbing information about ongoing projects. Marcus asked detailed questions, took notes, and generally impressed everyone with his grasp of business fundamentals. What none of them knew was that Marcus had been preparing for this role his entire life. Before the 5-year test, he'd graduated from Wharton Business School at the top of his class. He'd always been brilliant with numbers, strategy, and vision. His grandfather's test had forced him to suppress that side of himself. Now, unleashed, Marcus was a force to be reckoned with. By the end of his first week, Marcus had already made his mark. He approved a $500 million development project in Soho that previous management had been afraid to pursue. He restructured the company's approach to sustainable building, incorporating green technology without sacrificing profit margins. He personally negotiated a deal with the city that would allow Sullivan Enterprises to build affordable housing units alongside luxury developments, a plan that would benefit both the company's public image and actual people who needed homes. The business media noticed immediately. Sullivan Empire Heir emerges from obscurity, read the Wall Street Journal headline. Who is Marcus Sullivan? Asked Forbes, alongside a photo of Marcus leaving the office. The new prince of Manhattan real estate, proclaimed the New York Times business section. Claire managed his schedule with military precision, filling his days with meetings, site visits, and networking events. Marcus moved into a penthouse in Hudson Yards, a $35 million for 1,000-square-foot space with views of the Hudson River and the Manhattan skyline. James drove him everywhere in a Rolls-Royce Phantom. His wardrobe now consisted entirely of custom suits from Tom Ford, Brioni, and Ermenegildo Zegna. To the outside world, Marcus Sullivan had appeared fully formed, like Athena from Zeus's head. Nobody knew about the 5 years he'd spent driving a rideshare or working warehouse security. Nobody knew about the modest apartment in Queens or the wife who'd left him for someone better. Nobody except Marcus himself. He thought about Jessica often, usually late at night when he stood in his penthouse looking out at the glittering city. He wondered if she'd heard about Marcus Sullivan yet. He wondered if she'd made the connection. He doubted it. Jessica had never paid much attention when Marcus talked about his family or his past. She'd been too busy complaining about their present. 3 weeks after taking over as CEO, Claire entered his office with an elegant cream-colored envelope. "This just arrived for you," she said, placing it on his desk. "It's an invitation to the Metropolitan Charity Gala at the Plaza Hotel this Friday night. It's one of the biggest social events of the season. Tickets are $10,000 per person, and the guest list is strictly A-list." Marcus opened the envelope and read the invitation. The gala benefited several children's charities, with entertainment, dinner, and dancing. Dress code, black tie. Who else will be there? Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Claire pulled up a file on her tablet. Pretty much everyone who matters in New York. The mayor will be there, several state senators, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, old money families, new money entrepreneurs. She scrolled through the list. The Morrison family has a table. There it was. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. RSVP, yes. I'll need a +1. Already handled, Claire said with a small smile. Your grandfather suggested you might want to attend with someone appropriate. He's arranged for you to meet several eligible women. No, Marcus interruptive. No arrange dates. If I'm going to bring someone, I want it to be genuine. Very well. Should I RSVP for one then? Marcus considered. Part of him wanted to show up alone, confident and unattached. But another part, the part that was still human, still hurt, wanted Jessica to see that he'd moved on, that he was happy, that he'd upgraded while she downgraded. Actually, he said slowly, there's someone I met at the last networking event. Natalie Chun. Do you have her contact information? Claire's smile widened. Dr. Chun, the tech entrepreneur? Excellent choice, sir. She just sold her cybersecurity company for $300 million and is looking for investment opportunities. She's brilliant, accomplished, and completely unimpressed by wealth for its own sake. That's exactly why I want to ask her, Marcus said. Can you reach out to her assistant? Keep it casual. Mention that I have an extra ticket to the gala and thought she might enjoy the networking opportunity. Consider it done. 2 days later, Natalie Chin's assistant confirmed her attendance. Marcus found himself looking forward to the gala for reasons that had nothing to do with Jessica. Meanwhile, across town in Derek Morrison's Tribeca penthouse, Jessica was having a very different experience. The first month with Derek had been everything she dreamed of. Shopping sprees, expensive restaurants, parties with celebrities and influencers. Derek had showered her with gifts, designer clothes, jewelry, a new iPhone. He'd taken her to his family's beach house in the Hamptons, introduced her to his friends, and promised her the world. But lately, things had shifted. Derek was busy more often, distracted during their dates. His parents had visited once, and his mother had been distinctly cold to Jessica, asking pointed questions about her background, education, and career ambitions. When Jessica had mentioned that she'd been married before, Mrs. Morrison's expression had soured visibly. Derek doesn't need damaged goods, his mother had said to his father, loudly enough for Jessica to overhear. He needs someone from a good family, with connections. Jessica had felt anger and shame in equal measure. She wasn't damaged goods. She'd simply made a smart choice to upgrade from a nobody to someone with actual wealth and status. Why couldn't they understand that? Now, as she sat in Derek's penthouse, scrolling through Instagram, she saw something that made her breath catch. It was a post from one of her friends from college, Amanda, who'd married a lawyer and now lived in Greenwich, Connecticut. The post showed Amanda at some fancy charity event, and in the background, clearly visible, was a man who looked exactly like Marcus. But it couldn't be Marcus. This man wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. He was talking to what looked like the mayor. He looked confident, powerful, successful. Jessica zoomed in on the photo, her heart racing. It was Marcus, or someone who looked incredibly similar. The post was tagged with a location, Sullivan Enterprises Year-End Gala. Sullivan Enterprises. Jessica quickly opened a new browser and typed Marcus Sullivan into the search bar. The results made her feel like she'd been punched in the stomach. Marcus Sullivan, heir to the Sullivan Empire, takes helm of Manhattan Real Estate Division. Who is Marcus Sullivan? The billionaire you've never heard of. Sullivan Heir's first month, $500 million in new deals. Each article featured photos of Marcus. Her Marcus, the man who'd driven a rideshare and worked security, looking polished, powerful, and nothing like the husband she'd left 3 months ago. No, it wasn't possible. But as she read deeper, the truth became undeniable. Marcus Sullivan was the grandson of Richard Sullivan, founder of the Sullivan Empire. The family was worth over $8 billion. They owned properties across the East Coast, had investments in dozens of companies, and wielded enormous influence in business and politics. And she'd left him. She'd called him pathetic, said he smelled like a taxi, told him he'd never be enough. Jessica's hands shook as she continued reading. One article mentioned that Marcus had been living abroad for the past 5 years and had only recently returned to take over the family business. Another mentioned his penthouse in Hudson Yards, the same building where penthouses started at $30 million. "Babe, what's wrong?" Derek asked, emerging from his home office. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Jessica couldn't speak. She just turned her phone around, showing him the article. Derek read it, his expression morphing from confusion to shock to something that looked like fear. "This is your ex-husband?" Jessica nodded numbly. You were married to Marcus Sullivan and you left him? Derek's voice rose. Do you have any idea who the Sullivans are? My father has been trying to get a meeting with Richard Sullivan for 5 years. They're like the Rockefellers of the modern era. I didn't know, Jessica whispered. He never said anything. He drove an Uber. He worked security. We lived in Queens. Why would he do that if he's a billionaire? I don't know. Jessica's voice cracked. But it doesn't matter now, does it? I left him. I call him worthless. I said he'd never be enough. The magnitude of her mistake crashed over her like a wave. She'd left an $8 billion fortune for a $200 million one. She'd left genuine wealth for minor wealth. She divorced the heir to one of America's great fortunes because she thought he was poor. The irony was devastating. Does he know you're with me? Derek asked, his voice tight with an emotion Jessica couldn't quite identify. Was it anger? Fear? Jealousy? I told him I was dating an executive at Morrison Media Group, Jessica said slowly. I told him your name. Derek swore under his breath. The gala. The Metropolitan Charity Gala on Friday. My family has a table. If Marcus Sullivan is as connected as these articles say, he'll definitely be there. Will you see him? Jessica asked. Probably, Derek said. And he'll see us. He looked at Jessica with an expression she'd never seen before, disappointment mixed with calculation. You need to look absolutely perfect on Friday. Wear the gold dress I bought you. Get your hair and nails done. If we're going to run into your ex-husband, we need to show him that you didn't downgrade. But even as Derek said it, both of them knew the truth. Compared to Marcus Sullivan, Derek Morrison was the downgrade. And on Friday night at the Plaza Hotel, the whole world would see it. Marcus stood in his penthouse that same evening, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. He thought about Jessica, about Derek Morrison, about the life he'd left behind in Queens. Part of him felt vindicated. She'd wanted wealth and status, and it turned out she'd had it all along. She'd just been too shallow to see the person behind the circumstances. But another part of him felt genuinely free. For 5 years, he'd been pretending to be someone else. Now, finally, he could be himself. The real Marcus Sullivan. Not poor, not hiding, just authentic. And on Friday night at the Plaza, he'd take another step forward into his real life. Whatever happened with Jessica was secondary. Marcus Sullivan was home, and he was just getting started. The Plaza Hotel had hosted countless legendary events over its century-plus of existence. But the Metropolitan Charity Gala was one of the crown jewels of New York's social calendar. As Marcus's Rolls-Royce pulled up to the red carpet entrance on Friday evening, he could see why. Photographers lined the walkway, flashbulbs popping as each new arrival emerged from their vehicle. Women in designer gowns and men in immaculate tuxedos streamed into the historic building, a river of wealth and influence. Ready? Marcus asked his date. Natalie Chen smiled, adjusting the elegant navy blue gown that complemented her dark hair perfectly. I've pitched to venture capitalists and negotiated with Fortune 500 CEOs. I think I can handle a party. Marcus liked her immediately. Over the past week, they'd met 3 times, once for coffee, once for dinner, and once for a walking tour of a property Marcus was considering for development. Each time, he'd been impressed by her intelligence, her authenticity, and her complete lack of interest in his wealth. When he'd told her about his 5 years living as an ordinary person, she'd understood immediately. That's brilliant, she'd said. Most people born into wealth never learn what real life is like. You're probably one of the few billionaires who actually understands how the other 99% live. Tonight, she looked stunning, but more importantly, she looked comfortable. She wasn't starstruck by the wealth around them. She'd earned her own fortune, built her own company from scratch. She was Marcus's equal, not his accessory. They stepped onto the red carpet, and immediately the photographers began calling out. Mr. Sullivan, over here. Who's your date? Look this way. Marcus smiled and waved, keeping Natalie close as they made their way through the gauntlet. Inside, the plaza's grand ballroom had been transformed into something from fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting rainbow patterns across white linen-covered tables. A string orchestra played softly in one corner, and waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery bills. Marcus Sullivan. A deep voice interrupted his survey of the room. Marcus turned to find Mayor James Chun, no relation to Natalie, as it turned out, approaching with an outstretched hand. "I've been hoping to meet you. Your grandfather speaks very highly of you." What followed was a 45-minute conversation about Marcus's plans for affordable housing developments, his vision for sustainable urban growth, and his interest in public-private partnerships that could benefit the city. The mayor was genuinely interested, and by the end, they tentatively agreed to a meeting the following week to discuss specifics. "You're impressive," Natalie said when the mayor finally moved on to other guests. "Most people in your position would have talked about their portfolio or name-dropped. You actually care about the substance." "I spent 5 years working jobs that barely paid the bills," Marcus replied. "I saw how hard it is for ordinary people to make ends meet, how expensive housing is, how few opportunities exist for people who weren't born with advantages. If I have the resources to make a difference, why wouldn't I?" Natalie looked at him with an expression that made Marcus's heart skip a beat. "I think I'm going to enjoy getting to know you, Marcus Sullivan." Before he could respond, a ripple of attention moved through the crowd near the entrance. Marcus glanced over and felt his entire body tense. Jessica had arrived. She wore a gold dress that shimmered under the chandeliers, her hair styled in elaborate waves, her makeup flawless. Diamonds, probably gifts from Derek, sparkled at her throat and ears. She looked confident, triumphant even, as she walked in on Derek Morrison's arm. Derek looked exactly as Marcus remembered from the photos he'd seen online, tall, tan, with the kind of artificially perfect appearance that came from expensive personal trainers and good plastic surgery. His tuxedo was well-tailored, his hair perfectly styled. He looked like what he was, a rich man's son playing at being important. For a moment, Marcus and Jessica's eyes met across the crowded ballroom. The shock on her face was worth every painful moment of the past 3 months. Her mouth literally fell open, her perfectly applied lipstick making a perfect O of surprise. She stopped walking so abruptly that Derek, who'd been surveying the room with the air of someone cataloging his social credit, stumbled slightly. "Marcus," Jessica whispered, though he was too far away to hear. But he could read her lips. Marcus deliberately turned away, returning his attention to Natalie as if Jessica were just another guest among hundreds. From the corner of his eye, he could see Jessica frantically whispering to Derek, pointing in his direction. Derek's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something that looked suspiciously like panic. "Was that her?" Natalie asked quietly. "Your ex-wife?" "Yes," Marcus confirmed. "She looks like she's seen a ghost." "Good." Over the next hour, Marcus deliberately circulated through the ballroom, networking with other guests and very obviously ignoring Jessica's existence. He talked with the CEOs of 3 major corporations, discussed investment strategies with a hedge fund manager, and laughed at a philanthropist's story about accidentally bidding on her own donated item at a charity auction. All the while, he could feel Jessica's eyes on him. She'd positioned herself and Derek near the bar, a location that gave her a clear view of most of the room. Marcus occasionally caught glimpses of her watching him, her expression a mixture of confusion, shock, and something that might have been regret. Several other guests noticed the tension. New York society thrived on gossip, and the appearance of the mysterious Marcus Sullivan at the same event as the Morrison family, particularly with Derek Morrison bringing a date, was bound to generate speculation. "Isn't that Derek Morrison's girlfriend?" someone whispered near Marcus. "I heard she used to be married to someone else." "Poor thing probably thought she was trading up," another voice replied. "Imagine leaving your husband and then finding out you were married to Marcus Sullivan all along." The gossip spread like wildfire. Marcus didn't have to say anything. The situation spoke for itself. Dinner was announced, and Marcus found his seat at a table near the front of the ballroom, a position of honor befitting his family's status and generous donation to the charity. Natalie sat beside him, and they were joined by several other prominent couples, including a state senator and his wife. The Morrison table was across the room, close but not too close. Marcus could see Jessica picking at her food, barely eating despite the exquisite five-course meal. Derek looked increasingly uncomfortable, his jaw tight, his posture rigid. "Your ex-husband is here, isn't he?" Derek hissed at one point, loud enough for nearby tables to overhear. "That's Marcus Sullivan. The Marcus Sullivan. I didn't know," Jessica repeated for what must have been the 10th time. "He never told me." "How did you not know? Didn't you ever ask about his family? His background?" "He said his family was in business. I thought he meant like a small business. A corner store or something." Their argument was attracting attention. Other guests at nearby tables were clearly listening in, pretending to focus on their meals while actually absorbing every word. After dinner, the orchestra began playing for dancing. Marcus stood and extended his hand to Natalie. "Dance with me? I thought you'd never ask." As they moved onto the dance floor, Marcus felt genuinely happy for the first time in months. Natalie was warm and real in his arms, her conversation intelligent and engaging. They talked about her next business venture. She was considering starting a foundation to teach coding to underprivileged kids, and about Marcus's plans for Sullivan Enterprises. "You know everyone's watching us, right?" Natalie said softly, a smile playing at her lips. "I know. And you know your ex-wife looks like she's about to have a breakdown?" "I know that too." "Good," Natalie said, surprising him. "She hurt you. She made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences." Marcus pulled Natalie a little closer, and they continued dancing. He didn't look at Jessica. He didn't need to. He could feel her watching, could sense the weight of her regret across the ballroom. When the song ended, several other guests approached Marcus, wanting to meet him, to congratulate him on his recent business successes, to secure his attendance at their own upcoming events. Marcus handled it all with grace, introducing Natalie, making conversation, building relationships. He was in his element, and everyone could see it. It was nearly midnight when Jessica finally worked up the courage to approach. Marcus was standing near the bar with Natalie, discussing a potential investment opportunity, when he felt a hand on his arm. "Marcus!" He turned slowly, his expression polite but distant. "Jessica!" Up close, he could see the desperation in her eyes, the way her hand trembled slightly as she clutched her champagne glass. She looked beautiful, but there was something brittle about her now, something that hadn't been there before. I didn't know you'd be here," she stammered. "It's a charity gala. I made a donation." Marcus's tone was pleasant but impersonal, the way he might speak to any stranger. You donated? How much?" The question was so typically Jessica, immediately concerned with money and status, that Marcus almost smiled. "That's between me and the charity." "I saw the articles," Jessica blurted out. "About you. About your family." "I didn't know Marcus. You never told me. You never asked." Marcus replied simply. "You were too busy telling me I wasn't enough." Jessica flinched. "That's not fair. You let me believe you were poor. You lied to me." "I never lied. I worked real jobs and paid real bills. I just didn't tell you about my family's wealth. There's a difference." "What?" Jessica's voice rose slightly, drawing attention from nearby guests. "Why would you do that? Why would you put us through 5 years of struggling when you had billions?" Marcus studied her for a long moment before answering. "I wanted to know if you'd love me for myself. Turns out, you wouldn't. You love what you thought I could become, not who I actually was. The moment someone with more obvious wealth came along, you left." "That's not," Jessica started, but Marcus cut her off. "Derek Morrison, wasn't it? Senior executive at Morrison Media Group? Penthouse in Tribeca." Marcus's tone was conversational, but there was steel underneath. "How's that working out for you, Jessica?" "Don't," Jessica whispered. "Please don't." Natalie, who'd been watching the exchange with barely concealed interest, stepped forward. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've been introduced. I'm Natalie Chun." Jessica looked at Natalie as if seeing her for the first time. Her eyes took in the elegant dress, the confident posture, the easy way Natalie stood beside Marcus. "You're his date," Natalie supplied. "Among other things. Marcus has been telling me about his time working normal jobs. It's quite a story. Most people born into wealth never bother to understand how regular people live. It takes a special kind of character to do what he did." The comparison was clear, and it landed like a slap. Jessica had failed the exact test that Marcus had passed. She cared only about surface appearances, while Marcus had cared about substance. "I should go," Jessica said abruptly. "Derek will be wondering where I am." "Of course," Marcus said. "Enjoy your evening, Ms. Carter." The use of her maiden name, not even acknowledging their 5 years of marriage, was the final blow. Jessica turned and fled across the ballroom, her gold dress shimmering in the chandelier light. Marcus watched her go, feeling nothing but closure. "That was intense," Natalie said. "Yes," Marcus agreed, "but necessary." They stayed at the gala for another hour, but Marcus's heart wasn't in it anymore. The confrontation with Jessica had brought up too many memories, too much emotion. When he suggested they leave, Natalie agreed immediately. In the car ride back to her apartment, they sat in comfortable silence. "Thank you for tonight," Marcus said as James pulled up to her building. "Thank you for inviting me," Natalie replied. "And Marcus?" She was a fool. Anyone who couldn't see your worth without a bank statement is blind. Marcus walked her to her door, and when she kissed him goodnight, just a soft, brief press of lips that promised more, he felt something shift inside him. Jessica belonged to his past. Whatever happened with Natalie, whether it became something serious or remained just friendship, belonged to his future. And his future looked bright indeed. Derek Morrison's Tribeca penthouse was silent, except for the frantic clicking of Jessica's fingers on her laptop keyboard. It was 2 a.m., and she'd been researching Marcus Sullivan for the past 4 hours, ever since they'd fled the gala in humiliation. The evidence was everywhere, overwhelming and undeniable. Photos of the Sullivan estate in the Hamptons, a mansion that made Derek's penthouse look like a garden shed. Articles about Sullivan Enterprises' latest deals, each one worth more than Derek's entire net worth. Profile pieces in Forbes, Fortune, and the Wall Street Journal, all painting Marcus as the brilliant young heir to one of America's great fortunes. $8 billion. Her ex-husband was worth $8 billion, and she'd left him because she thought he was poor. "This can't be real," Jessica muttered, clicking on yet another article. "This has to be a mistake." But it wasn't a mistake. Every source confirmed the same story. Marcus Sullivan, 32, grandson of real estate magnate Richard Sullivan, heir to the Sullivan Empire, recently returned to New York after several years away to take over the company's Manhattan division. Several years away. 5 years, to be exact. The exact amount of time Marcus had been married to her. "Oh my God," Jessica whispered as the pieces fell into place. "It was a test. He was testing me." Derek emerged from his bedroom, his hair disheveled, wearing expensive silk pajamas. His expression was dark. "Are you still obsessing over this?" "Obsessing." Jessica's voice rose hysterically. "Derek, do you understand why I gave up? Do you have any idea?" "Understand perfectly," Derek snapped. "You were married to one of the richest men on the East Coast, and you left him for me, which makes me look like an idiot." "You?" Jessica stared at him in disbelief. "This is about how you look?" "Yes," Derek shouted. "My father called me tonight. He saw the photos from a gala. Everyone's talking about how Derek Morrison's girlfriend used to be married to Marcus Sullivan. They're laughing at us." "Jessica." "At me?" "I didn't know." Jessica repeated for what felt like the 100th time. "How was I supposed to know?" "You could have asked about his background, his family, his past." Derek paced the living room, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Instead, you saw a guy in a cheap apartment and assumed he was nobody. And now we both look like fools." "We can fix this," Jessica said desperately. "I can talk to him, explain." "Explain what?" "That you only left him because you thought he was poor." Derek laughed bitterly. "That'll go over well. Maybe he still has feelings for me. We were married for 5 years." Derek stopped pacing and turned to look at Jessica with an expression that was part pity, part disgust. "Did you see the way he looked at you tonight? Or rather, the way he didn't look at you? You're nothing to him now, Jessica, less than nothing. You're the gold digger who proved exactly what he suspected about people who only care about money." The words stung because they were true. Jessica had seen Marcus's expression at the gala, polite, distant, completely indifferent. The man who'd once loved her enough to work 2 jobs to support her dreams had looked at her like she was a stranger. No, worse than a stranger. like she was something unpleasant he'd scraped off his shoe. "I made a mistake," Jessica whispered. "You made the biggest mistake of your life," Derek agreed. "And somehow I got caught in the crossfire." "What does that mean?" Derek sighed, running his hand through his hair. "My father wants me to distance myself from you. The Morrison family has been trying to build connections with the Sullivan empire for years. Having my girlfriend be Marcus Sullivan's bitter ex-wife isn't exactly helping our cause." Jessica felt ice spread through her chest. "You're breaking up with me?" "I'm thinking about it," Derek said coldly. "Unless you can somehow fix this situation, which I doubt you can." He walked back to his bedroom and closed the door, leaving Jessica alone in the living room with her laptop and her regrets. Jessica stared at the screen at another photo of Marcus from the gala. He looked happy in the picture, genuinely happy in a way she'd never seen during their marriage. The woman beside him, Natalie Chun, according to the photo caption, looked at Marcus with obvious affection and respect. That should have been Jessica in that photo. That should have been Jessica on Marcus's arm, wearing diamonds that cost more than a car, attending events with the city's elite. Instead, she was sitting in Derek Morrison's penthouse at 2 a.m., her relationship crumbling, her future uncertain. Jessica opened a new browser tab and searched for Marcus Sullivan's office address. Sullivan Enterprises occupied an entire building in the financial district. She could go there. She could wait for him, apologize, explain that she'd made a terrible mistake. But even as she considered it, she knew how pathetic it would sound. "I'm sorry I left you when I thought you were poor. Can I have another chance now that I know you're rich?" There had to be another way. Some way to talk to Marcus, to make him understand that what they'd had was real, that her feelings had been genuine even if she'd been blind to his true circumstances. Jessica picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Most of her friends from the past few months were Derek's friends, people who'd accepted her because of who she was dating. But there were a few old contacts, people she'd known before Marcus, before everything got complicated. Her finger hovered over Amanda's name. Amanda, her college roommate, who'd been at the gala tonight. Amanda, who'd seen the whole humiliating encounter. Before she could second-guess herself, Jessica called. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" Amanda's sleepy voice answered. "I need to talk," Jessica said. "About Marcus." There was a long pause. "Jessica, I don't think. Please. I know how it looks. I know everyone thinks I'm a gold digger or an idiot or both. But I just need someone to talk to." Another pause, then a sigh. "Fine. But this conversation doesn't mean I approve of what you did." For the next hour, Jessica poured out everything. Her frustrations during the marriage, her growing resentment of their financial struggles, her attraction to Derek's obvious wealth, her decision to leave. And then the shock of discovering who Marcus really was. Amanda listened mostly in silence, occasionally making sympathetic noises but offering no solutions. "So what do I do?" Jessica finally asked. "Honestly, I think you move on," Amanda said. "Marcus has clearly moved on. He has a new life, probably a new girlfriend. You going back now just looks like you want his money. But what if it's not about the money? What if I genuinely miss him? Do you miss him, or do you miss the idea of what you could have had?" Amanda's question was gentle but pointed. Jessica opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. She didn't know. When she thought about Marcus, what did she see? The man who'd worked 14-hour days to support her dreams? Or the billionaire whose wealth could have given her everything she'd ever wanted? "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "Then you have your answer," Amanda said. "Jessica, the fact that you can't separate the man from the money tells me everything. Let him go. He deserves someone who sees him, not his bank account." After they hung up, Jessica sat in the darkness of Derek's penthouse, Amanda's words echoing in her mind. Across town, in his Hudson Yards penthouse, Marcus stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the sleeping city. He held a glass of scotch, expensive single malt that cost more than he used to spend on groceries for a month, and thought about the gala. Seeing Jessica again had been harder than he'd expected. Not because he still loved her. That feeling had died the moment she'd walked out their apartment door. But because seeing her face-to-face had brought back all the memories of those 5 years, good and bad. He'd loved her once. Genuinely, completely loved her. He'd worked himself to exhaustion to give her a good life, to save for her dreams, to build a future together. and she'd thrown it away the moment something shinier came along. His phone buzzed. A text for Natalie. Thank you again for tonight. I had a wonderful time. Coffee next week. Marcus smiled. Definitely. I'll have Claire coordinate with your assistant. Another text. Or you could just text me directly. We're not doing a business deal. Marcus, we're two people getting to know each other. His smile widened. Fair point. How's Tuesday at 10? Perfect. Sweet dreams. Marcus set down his phone, feeling lighter than he had in months. Natalie represented everything Jessica wasn't. Authentic, accomplished, genuinely interested in him as a person. She'd built her own fortune through intelligence and hard work. She didn't need his money, didn't care about his status beyond professional respect for his business acumen. She saw Marcus Sullivan the person, not Marcus Sullivan the heir. A notification popped up on his laptop. An email from Claire with tomorrow's schedule. Meetings with architects, a site visit to the Soho development, lunch with a potential investor, and a call with his grandfather. Marcus's life was full, purposeful, moving forward. Jessica belonged to his past, a painful but valuable lesson learned. He finished his scotch, set the glass in the sink, and went to bed. Tomorrow was another day, another opportunity to build something meaningful. Jessica could spend all night obsessing about what she'd lost. Marcus had better things to do. Tuesday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of New York weather that made everyone huddle under umbrellas and hurry to their destinations. Marcus sat in the back of his Rolls-Royce as James navigated traffic towards Sullivan Enterprises, reviewing briefing documents for the day's meetings on his tablet. His phone rang. Claire's name appeared on the screen. Good morning, Marcus answered. Good morning, sir. I wanted to give you a heads up before you arrive at the office. Claire's voice was professional, but tinged with concern. There's a woman in our lobby who claims to be your wife. Ex-wife, I should say. She's been here since we opened at 8 a.m. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Of course, Jessica would do this. Does she seem hostile? More desperate than hostile. Security tried to escort her out, but she's being persistent. I can have them remove her if you'd like. Marcus considered. Part of him wanted to avoid the confrontation entirely, to simply have security take her away and never think about it again. But another part, the part that had loved her once, felt that he owed her at least a conversation. Let her wait, Marcus decided. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Have security keep an eye on her, but don't remove her yet. When Marcus arrived at Sullivan Enterprises, he entered through the private executive entrance rather than the main lobby. He wanted to observe Jessica before deciding whether to talk to her. From the executive floor, he accessed the security camera feeds on his computer. There she was, sitting in the lobby's waiting area, looking small and lost among the marble and modern art. She wore jeans and a sweater, a stark contrast to the designer outfit she'd worn at the gala. Her makeup was minimal, her hair in a simple ponytail. She looked more like the Jessica he'd known during their marriage than the woman who'd walked out on him. Marcus watched her for several minutes, noting the way she kept checking her phone, the nervous fidgeting with her purse strap, the anxiety written across her features. Claire appeared in his office doorway. What would you like me to do, sir? Marcus made a decision. Tell her I have meetings all day. Give her my business card and suggest she email me if she wants to discuss something. Are you sure? She seems determined to wait. I'm sure. Claire nodded and left. Marcus watched on the security feed as Claire approached Jessica in the lobby. He couldn't hear their conversation, but he could see Jessica's face fall, see her shoulders slump in defeat. She took the business card Claire offered, stared at it for a long moment, then slowly stood and walked toward the exit. For a brief second, Marcus felt a pang of something. Not quite sympathy, but perhaps a ghost of old affection. Then he remembered her words, "You were never enough." Derek showed me what real success looks like. The pang disappeared. Marcus turned away from the security feed and focused on his work. He had a $200 million development deal to finalize, investors to court, and a city to help reshape. Jessica's problems were no longer his concern. 3 days later, Marcus met Natalie for lunch at a trendy restaurant in Soho. They'd been texting regularly since the gala, easy conversations that flowed naturally from business topics to personal interests to playful banter. So, I did some research on you. Natalie admitted over appetizers, a playful smile on her face. Should I be worried? Marcus asked. Maybe. I found an article from 5 years ago about Richard Sullivan's grandson mysteriously disappearing from public life. There was speculation about everything from addiction to legal troubles to a secret marriage. She paused. Turns out the secret marriage was actually true. Marcus set down his fork. Does it bother you that I was married? Not at all. People have pasts. But I'm curious about why you disappeared for 5 years. The articles weren't clear. Marcus had been dreading this conversation, but he also knew that any real relationship, friendship or otherwise, required honesty. He told her about his grandfather's test, about wanting to understand life without wealth, about hoping to find someone who would love him for himself. And instead you found someone who proved exactly why the test was necessary, Natalie concluded. Yes, I'm sorry that happened to you, but I'm also glad, in a selfish way, because it means you're available now. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. And for what it's worth, I would have liked you just as much if you'd been driving that Uber permanently. Marcus believed her. That was the difference between Natalie and Jessica. He could believe her. They were finishing dessert when Marcus noticed a familiar figure through the restaurant's window. Jessica stood across the street, partially hidden behind a parked car, watching them. Don't look now, Marcus said calmly, but my ex-wife is watching us from across the street. Natalie's eyes widened. Seriously? She's been trying to talk to me all week. I've been avoiding her. Do you want to leave through the back? Marcus considered, then shook his head. No, let's just leave normally. I'm not going to hide or change my behavior because she's stalking me. They paid the bill and exited the restaurant. As expected, Jessica immediately started across the street toward them, dodging traffic in her haste. Marcus, wait, she called out. Marcus stopped, turning to face her with Natalie at his side. Up close, Jessica looked worse than she had in the Sullivan Enterprises lobby. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her skin pale, her entire demeanor screaming desperation. Jessica, Marcus said neutrally. You need to stop this. I just want to talk, Jessica pleaded. 5 minutes. Please. We have nothing to discuss. Please. I know you're angry. I know you hate me, but please just give me 5 minutes to explain. Natalie touched Marcus's arm. I'll wait in the car. Give her the 5 minutes. Natalie, it's okay. Sometimes people need closure. She kissed Marcus's cheek and walked toward where James was waiting with the Rolls-Royce. Marcus turned back to Jessica. You have 5 minutes. The words came pouring out of Jessica in a frantic rush. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know who you were. I thought you were struggling, that we were poor, that I had to give up my dreams because of our circumstances. When Derek came along offering me everything I thought I wanted, I took it. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. About what? Marcus asked. About leaving me, or about leaving someone with money? Jessica flinched. About not seeing you. The real you. Marcus, we were married for 5 years. I know you. I know you're kind, intelligent, hard-working. You know the man I pretended to be, Marcus interrupted. You never knew the real me because you never bothered to ask. In 5 years of marriage, you never once asked about my childhood, my education, my family beyond surface-level questions. You didn't want to know me, Jessica. You wanted what you thought I could provide. That's not true, isn't it? Tell me honestly. If I'd shown up at that gala still working as an Uber driver, would you have wanted me back? Jessica opened her mouth, then closed it. The answer was written all over her face. Exactly, Marcus said quietly. Jessica, I don't hate you. I'm not even angry anymore. I'm just done. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. But Derek and Jessica stopped, seeming to realize that admitting her relationship with Derek was failing would only prove Marcus's point. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I made a mistake, and I want to fix it. You can't fix it, Marcus said. There's nothing left to fix. The man you were married to doesn't exist anymore. He was a character I played for a test, and you failed that test spectacularly. Please don't say that. It's the truth. You show me exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching. You're superficial, materialistic, and cruel. You call me pathetic. You said I smelled like a taxi. You told me I was never enough. Marcus's voice remained calm, but each word landed like a hammer. Those words came from your true self, Jessica. The self that didn't have to impress a billionaire because she thought she was talking to a nobody. Tears streamed down Jessica's face. I didn't mean those things. Yes, you did. And that's okay. You're allowed to want wealth and status and all the trappings of success. But I'm allowed to want someone who sees value beyond bank statements and property holdings. Like her. Jessica gestured toward where Natalie waited in the car. Your new girlfriend? Natalie built her own fortune. She doesn't need mine. That's the difference between you two. I could be that person, Jessica insisted desperately. I could learn. I could change. Jessica, stop. Marcus's tone was firm, but not unkind. It's over. We're over. We've been over since the moment you walked out. This conversation, it doesn't change anything. Go home. Move on with your life. Let me move on with mine. Derek's leaving me, Jessica blurted out. He said I'm bad for his family's reputation. He wants me gone by the end of the month. I'm sorry to hear that, Marcus said, and meant it. Not because he cared about Derek, but because he could see Jessica's life crumbling and he wasn't completely heartless. But it's not my problem to solve. So that's it? You're just going to walk away? Yes. And you should too. Marcus started toward his car, then paused and turned back. Jessica, you're beautiful, smart, and capable. You could build a good life for yourself if you stopped measuring your worth by other people's bank accounts. I genuinely hope you figure that out someday. He walked to the Rolls-Royce where Natalie and James waited, and he didn't look back. Jessica stood on the sidewalk, crying openly now as the car pulled away into traffic. Passers-by gave her curious looks, but no one stopped to help. In a city of 8 million people, she'd never felt more alone. That evening, Marcus and Natalie had dinner at his penthouse, a casual meal that Claire had arranged, nothing fancy. They ate pasta and drank wine and talked about everything except Jessica. Are you okay? Natalie finally asked as they stood by the windows, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. I am, Marcus said, surprised to realize it was true. I gave her closure. I gave myself closure. Now we both move forward. Forward is good, Natalie agreed, moving closer to him. I like forward. When she kissed him, Marcus felt the last chains of his past fall away. Jessica belonged to yesterday. Natalie, brilliant, authentic, genuine Natalie, might belong to tomorrow. And tomorrow looked bright indeed. The New York Business Summit was one of the most prestigious events on the corporate calendar, attracting Fortune 500 CEOs, entrepreneurs, investors, and politicians. This year, Marcus Sullivan was the keynote speaker. He stood backstage at the Javits Center, reviewing his notes one final time. The speech was about sustainable urban development and the responsibility of wealthy corporations to give back to their communities, topics he'd become passionate about during his 5 years living as an ordinary person. 2 minutes, Mr. Sullivan, a stagehand informed him. Marcus nodded, straightening his tie. Through a gap in the curtain, he could see the massive auditorium filling with attendees. Thousands of people, all here to hear about business, innovation, and the future of New York City. What Marcus didn't know was that Jessica Carter had obtained press credentials. Derek's media company, Morrison Media Group, had relationships with various outlets. When Jessica had begged Derek for one last favor before she moved out of his penthouse, he'd reluctantly arranged for her to attend the summit as a freelance journalist. It was the least he could do, he'd said, before cutting all ties. Jessica sat in the media section, her press badge hanging around her neck, her phone ready to record. She didn't know what she hoped to accomplish. Maybe she'd get a chance to ask Marcus a question during the Q&A. Maybe he'd see her in the audience and realize he still cared. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to fix everything. Marcus took the stage to thunderous applause. He looked commanding in his tailored suit, confident and articulate as he began his presentation. For 45 minutes, he held the audience captivated, discussing innovative approaches to affordable housing, green building practices, and public-private partnerships that could benefit everyone. Jessica listened, mesmerized. This was Marcus at his best, intelligent, passionate, visionary. She remembered times during their marriage when he'd talked about business ideas, about wanting to make a difference, and she dismissed his dreams as unrealistic fantasies. Now those same dreams were being applauded by thousands of people. The Q&A session began. Journalists and attendees raised their hands, asking about specific projects, implementation challenges, and return on investment. Jessica's hand went up. She knew Marcus had seen her. His eyes had landed on her briefly, and something had flickered across his face before he looked away. After answering several other questions, Marcus finally pointed in her direction. Yes, the woman in the blue blazer. Jessica stood, her heart pounding. Mr. Sullivan, you've talked about the importance of authentic relationships in business. But how does it feel to be underestimated? To have people judge you by appearances rather than character? The room went silent. The question was clearly personal, clearly pointed. Marcus met her gaze steadily. It's disappointing, he said calmly, but also enlightening. Being underestimated shows you who people really are when they think you have nothing to offer them. It reveals character, both theirs and your own. He paused. The real question is what you do with that knowledge. Do you become bitter? Or do you become better? And which did you choose? Jessica pressed, her voice trembling. Better, Marcus said simply. Always better. Next question. The dismissal was clear. Marcus pointed to someone else, and Jessica sank back in her seat, tears threatening to spill. After the summit ended, Marcus was surrounded by people wanting to shake his hand, exchange business cards, and discuss potential collaborations. Jessica waited, watching from a distance, until the crowd finally thinned. She approached just as Marcus was about to leave with Claire and his security detail. Marcus, please. Ms. Carter, you need to stop this, Marcus said, his voice low but firm. This is harassment. I just want to talk. 5 minutes. You promised me 5 minutes last time, and you walked away after 3. Security moved forward, but Marcus held up a hand. It's fine. I'll handle this. He led Jessica to a quiet corner of the convention center, away from prying eyes and ears. What do you want, Jessica? Marcus asked, exhaustion creeping into his voice. What possible outcome are you hoping for here? I want you to forgive me, Jessica said desperately. I want another chance. I want us to try again. Try what? We're divorced. That's final. We could date. Start over. Get to know each other again, the real us this time. Marcus stared at her in disbelief. You still don't get it. There is no us. There never really was. You loved the idea of security and comfort, and when I couldn't provide it fast enough, you left. Now you want me back because I can provide it after all. That's not love, Jessica. That's opportunism. It's not about the money. Jessica insisted, even as they both knew it was a lie. Then prove it. Go build a life for yourself. Find a career you're passionate about. Become someone you're proud to be. And maybe someday, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Marcus started to walk away, then turned back. And, Jessica, stop stalking me. Stop showing up at my events. Stop trying to manufacture meetings. If you don't, I'll get a restraining order. He walked away, leaving Jessica standing alone in the empty convention center. That evening, Marcus had dinner reservations at Maria, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. He'd invited Natalie to join him, and they sat at a corner table, enjoying Italian seafood and good wine. They were laughing about something Natalie's assistant had done that day when Marcus saw Derek and Jessica enter the restaurant. It was too much of a coincidence. Jessica must have found out where he'd be, probably by bribing someone on his staff or hacking his calendar somehow. Derek looked annoyed, being dragged to dinner with an ex-girlfriend who was clearly obsessed with her ex-husband. Jessica looked determined, her jaw set, her eyes locked on Marcus. They're here, Marcus told Natalie quietly. Want to leave? No, I'm not letting her chase me out of a restaurant I booked a month ago. Jessica approached their table with Derek trailing reluctantly behind her. Other diners were starting to notice the commotion. Marcus, Jessica said, her voice loud enough to carry. Please, just hear me out. Jessica, you need to leave, Marcus said, his tone final. I made a mistake. I know that now. I was shallow and stupid, and I threw away the best thing in my life. Tears streamed down her face, her voice rising. But I've changed. I can be better. Just give me one more chance. The entire restaurant was watching now. Phones were out recording. This was going to be all over social media within the hour. Natalie stood up, placing herself between Marcus and Jessica. "I think you need to go," she said calmly but firmly. "Who are you to tell me anything?" Jessica snapped. "You're just his rebound." "I'm the woman he's choosing to spend time with," Natalie replied evenly. "The woman who values him for who he is, not what he has. The woman who didn't need to see a bank statement to know he was worth knowing." Derek finally stepped forward, grabbing Jessica's arm. "Enough. This is embarrassing." "Embarrassing?" Jessica whirled on him. "You're the one who wanted me to come here. You said I needed to confront him. I said you needed closure, not to make a scene." Derek hissed. The restaurant manager appeared, flanked by security. "I'm going to have to ask you all to leave if you can't keep your voices down." Marcus stood, pulling out his wallet and placing several $100 bills on the table. More than enough to cover their meal and a generous tip. "We're leaving," he said. "And these two are also leaving." "Marcus, please." Jessica made one last desperate grab for his arm, but Natalie stepped between them again. "He's done," Natalie said quietly. "Can't you see that? He's moved on. You need to do the same." Security escorted Jessica and Derek out of the restaurant. Marcus and Natalie left through a side entrance, where James was already waiting with the car. Once inside the vehicle, Natalie turned to Marcus. "Well, that was dramatic." "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "I never intended." "Don't apologize. None of this is your fault." Natalie took his hand. "But Marcus, she's not going to stop. Not until something forces her to." "I know. I'll talk to my lawyers tomorrow about a restraining order." Within an hour, multiple videos of the restaurant scene had gone viral. Hashtag Sullivan ex-wife was trending on Twitter. The comments were brutal. "Imagine leaving a billionaire because you thought he was poor, faced with tears of joy. She really thought she was upgrading from Sullivan to Morrison. That's embarrassing. This is what happens when you judge people by their bank account." The new girlfriend handled that with so much class. The ex-wife? Not so much. Jessica's face was everywhere, crying, screaming, begging. The video had been viewed millions of times by morning. She'd become a cautionary tale, a meme, a symbol of superficiality and poor judgment. Derek Morrison called her the next day. "My father saw the videos. He's furious. I'm sorry, Jessica, but you need to be out of my place by end of day tomorrow." "Where am I supposed to go?" Jessica asked, her voice hollow. "That's not my problem anymore." Marcus, meanwhile, woke to dozens of messages of support from friends, colleagues, and even strangers who'd seen the videos and sympathized with the situation. His grandfather called to check on him. "You handled that with remarkable restraint," Richard said. "I'm proud of you, Marcus." "Thanks, grandfather. I just want it to be over." "It will be." She's humiliated now. The whole world has seen her desperation. She'll retreat and lick her wounds, and hopefully learn something from this. Marcus hoped his grandfather was right. He had a meeting with his lawyers that afternoon to discuss the restraining order. He had dinner plans with Natalie that evening. He had a life to live, a company to run, a legacy to build. Jessica Carter belonged to his past, and thanks to her own actions, the whole world now knew it. 3 days after the restaurant incident went viral, Jessica Carter stood in the lobby of a budget hotel in Newark, New Jersey, staring at the dingy walls and wondering how her life had come to this. Derek had kept his word. She'd been evicted from his Tribeca penthouse within 24 hours. The designer clothes and jewelry he'd bought her, he demanded all of it back, sending his assistant with a list and boxes. The friends she'd made through Derek? They'd stopped returning her calls the moment the videos went viral. Jessica had exactly $3,847 in her bank account, no job, and no prospects. Her degree in communications from community college wasn't getting her far in a city full of Ivy League graduates. The few interviews she'd managed to secure had gone nowhere. Potential employers Googled her name and saw the videos, the memes, the mockery. She'd become New York's most famous gold digger, and not in a good way. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Jessica answered cautiously. "Ms. Carter? This is Patricia Wong from Morrison Media Group's legal department. I'm calling to inform you that Derek Morrison is filing a lawsuit for the return of various items gifted to you during your relationship, including but not limited to jewelry, electronics, and clothing. The total value exceeds $75,000. Jessica's blood ran cold. You can't do that. Those were gifts. Mr. Morrison's legal team disagrees. We sent a detailed list to your last known address. You have 30 days to return the items or face legal action. I already returned everything. His assistant came and took it all. According to our records, several items are still unaccounted for. Please review the list carefully. After the lawyer hung up, Jessica sat on the lumpy hotel bed and cried. She'd returned everything Derek had asked for. If items were missing, it was because he'd never given them to her in the first place. But she had no way to prove that. No receipts, no documentation. Across town in Manhattan, Derek Morrison was having his own crisis. His father, Christopher Morrison, sat across from him in a Morrison Media Group executive suite, his expression thunderous. Do you have any idea how much damage you've done to this family's reputation? Christopher demanded. The Sullivan family has been on our call list for years. Years. And now, because you decided to date your employee's ex-wife, we're a laughingstock. I didn't know she was married to Marcus Sullivan. Derek protested. You should have known. You should have done your research before parading her around at high society events. Christopher stood, pacing behind his desk. Richard Sullivan himself called me yesterday. Do you know what he said? Derek shook his head, dreading the answer. He said, and I quote, Christopher, I'm disappointed your son has such poor judgment and character. It makes me question whether any Morrison has the discernment necessary for a business relationship with our organization. Christopher slammed his hand on the desk. He shut down our development deal, the one we've been negotiating for 6 months, because of you and your gold-digging girlfriend. Weekly. I don't care. The damage is done. Christopher took a deep breath, clearly trying to control his temper. You're being removed from the senior executive position. You'll work in the media acquisitions department, entry level, until you prove you can make sound decisions again. Dad, you can't. I can and I will. This is my company, and I won't let your mistakes destroy everything I've built. Christopher returned to his seat, looking suddenly old and tired. You're 35 years old, Derek. It's time you learned that actions have consequences. Derek left his father's office in a daze. He'd gone from senior executive to entry-level employee in the span of 10 minutes. His corner office would be given to someone else. His assistant would be reassigned. His expense account would be slashed. All because he'd dated Jessica Carter. Meanwhile, Marcus Sullivan was having a very different kind of day. The $500 million Soho development had been approved by the city. Ground would be broken next month. The project would include both luxury condos and affordable housing units, a model Marcus hoped would set a precedent for future development throughout the city. The mayor wants to attend the groundbreaking ceremony, Claire informed him during their morning briefing. He's calling it a model for public-private partnerships. That works, Marcus agreed. Make sure we get good press coverage. I want other developers to see that you can be profitable and socially responsible at the same time. After Claire left, Marcus's personal phone rang. Natalie. Hey. He answered, smiling automatically. Hey yourself. Are you free for lunch? I want to run something by you. They met at a quiet cafe in Greenwich Village. Natalie had been working on her foundation idea, the one that would teach coding to underprivileged kids, and wanted Marcus's input on the business structure. I'm thinking a 501c3. Obviously, Natalie explained over sandwiches. But I want to make sure it's sustainable long-term. I don't want to just throw money at the problem. I want to create a model that works. Marcus listened, asked questions, and offered suggestions based on his family's own philanthropic work. It was the kind of conversation he'd always wanted to have with a partner. Substantive, meaningful, focused on making a real difference. You know, Natalie said as they were finishing lunch, you're remarkably well-adjusted for someone who went through what you did with Jessica. What do you mean? You had your heart broken, got publicly humiliated, and still came out the other side wanting to help people. Most people would be bitter. Marcus considered this. I was bitter for about a week. But then I realized something. Jessica's betrayal taught me exactly what my grandfather was trying to teach me with that 5-year test. Character matters. Authenticity matters. Everything else is just noise. That's remarkably mature, Natalie said with a smile. Or remarkably lucky that I met you right after everything fell apart, Marcus replied. Having someone genuine to compare Jessica to made it pretty clear who was worth my time. Natalie reached across the table and took his hand. I'm glad I met you too, Marcus Sullivan. That evening, Richard Sullivan called Marcus to his Hampton estate for dinner. When Marcus arrived, he found his grandfather in excellent spirits. The Morrison deal fell through, Richard said over cocktails, clearly pleased. I heard. Derek's father called you. Begging practically. Wanted to salvage the relationship. Richard sipped his scotch. I told him no. The Morrisons don't have the character we look for in business partners. That seems harsh. Christopher Morrison didn't do anything wrong. He raised his son with poor judgment. That reflects on him. Richard studied his grandson. But more importantly, I wanted to send a message to everyone in our circle. The Sullivans don't tolerate disloyalty or bad character. You mess with a Sullivan, you pay the price. Marcus felt uncomfortable with his grandfather using the family's power this way, but he also understood the message it sent. In the world of ultra-wealthy families, reputation was everything. How are you doing, really? Richard asked, his tone softening. All this business with your ex-wife? I'm fine, grandfather. Better than fine, actually. I've learned what I need in a partner, and I've found someone who embodies all of it. The Chin woman? Natalie, yes. Richard nodded approvingly. Good bloodline. Smart family. Self-made fortune. You could do worse. It's not about bloodlines or fortunes, Marcus protested. It's about character, Richard finished. I know, my boy. I know. But in our world, those things tend to correlate. People from good families who've earned their own success usually have the character you're looking for. Marcus couldn't entirely disagree. Over dinner, they discussed business, philanthropy, and family legacy. Richard was getting older, thinking more about mortality and succession. He wanted to make sure Marcus was ready to take over the entire empire, not just the Manhattan division. You've proven yourself, Richard said over dessert. The 5-year test, the way you've handled your personal crisis, the success you've had in just a few months, you're ready. I'm going to start transitioning more responsibility to you. I'm honored, grandfather. Don't be honored yet. It's a burden as much as a privilege. But I think you understand that now, after living as an ordinary person. You understand what our wealth means, what responsibility it carries. Marcus did understand. He'd seen poverty, struggle, the daily challenges of people trying to make ends meet. He'd lived it himself. That perspective would shape how he ran Sullivan Enterprises, how he invested the family fortune, how he tried to make a difference. A week later, Jessica finally found a job. Retail sales at a department store in Queens. The pay was $16 an hour, barely enough to cover her rent in a tiny studio apartment. Her co-workers gossiped about her, having recognized her from the viral videos. Her manager watched her like a hawk, waiting for her to mess up. Every day was humiliating. Every night, alone in her small apartment, Jessica thought about the penthouse in Hudson Yards where Marcus lived, about the life she could have had, about the magnitude of her mistake. She'd stopped trying to contact Marcus. The restraining order his lawyers had threatened was real. Any attempt to approach him would result in legal consequences. Besides, she'd finally accepted what everyone had been trying to tell her. It was over. Marcus had moved on. She'd seen photos of him and Natalie in the society pages, attending galas and charity events. They looked happy together, comfortable in a way Jessica and Marcus had never been. Natalie looked at Marcus like he hung the moon, and Marcus looked at Natalie with genuine affection and respect. That should have been Jessica. That was supposed to be Jessica. But it wasn't, and it never would be again. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, Jessica began to understand what she'd actually lost. Not the money or the status or the luxury lifestyle, though she missed all of that. But she'd lost a man who had genuinely loved her, who had worked himself to exhaustion to support her dreams, who had been willing to sacrifice his own comfort for her happiness. And she'd thrown it away because she'd judged him by his paycheck instead of his character. The lesson had come too late, at too high a price. But it was a lesson learned nonetheless. Marcus Sullivan had moved on to better things. Jessica Carter was left to figure out how to build a life from the ashes of her own mistakes. 6 months later, autumn painted Manhattan in shades of gold and crimson. Marcus stood on the roof deck of his Hudson Yards penthouse, watching the sun set over the Hudson River, a glass of wine in his hand and a sense of contentment in his heart. The past half year had been transformative. The Soho development project was ahead of schedule and under budget. Sullivan Enterprises had closed deals worth over $2 billion, expanding into new markets while maintaining their commitment to sustainable, socially responsible development. Marcus had been featured on the cover of Forbes with the headline, "The Sullivan Renaissance: How a Young Heir is Revolutionizing Real Estate." But more important than any business success was what had happened in his personal life. "There you are," Natalie said, stepping onto the roof deck. She wore jeans and one of Marcus's oversized sweaters, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked beautiful, natural, perfect. "Hey," Marcus said, pulling her close. "How was your meeting?" "Excellent. We got approval for the foundation. We'll launch in 3 months, starting with 10 schools in underserved neighborhoods." Natalie's eyes sparkled with excitement. "We're going to change lives, Marcus. I know you will." They stood together, watching the sunset, comfortable in the silence. Their relationship had deepened gradually over the past months, built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. They challenged each other intellectually, supported each other's ambitions, and enjoyed each other's company without pretense or performance. "I have something to tell you," Marcus said suddenly. Natalie looked up at him. "Should I be worried?" "No, at least I hope not." Marcus took a breath. "My grandfather wants to officially name me as his successor. Next month, there's going to be a big announcement. I'll become CEO of Sullivan Enterprises, not just the Manhattan division, the entire empire." "Marcus, that's incredible." Natalie hugged him tightly. "I'm so proud of you." "There's more." Marcus pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. "With that position comes a lot of scrutiny. Media attention, social obligations, constant public exposure. Anyone in my life will be in the spotlight, too. I need to know if you're okay with that." Natalie considered this seriously. "As long as we're together, because we want to be, not because it looks good for your image, then yes. I can handle the scrutiny. It won't always be easy." "Nothing worth having is easy," Natalie replied. "You taught me that, remember? When you told me about your 5-year test." Marcus smiled. His grandfather's test had been the most difficult thing he'd ever done, but it had been worth it. It had taught him about himself, about what really mattered, about the difference between authentic and superficial. "There's something else," Marcus said, his heart racing now. "Something I want to ask you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. When he opened it, a diamond ring sparkled in the fading sunlight. A beautiful stone, yes, but not ostentatious. Simple, elegant, perfect for Natalie. "We've known each other for 6 months," Marcus said. "I know that's not very long by traditional standards. But I also spent 5 years in a marriage where I never really knew my partner at all. With you, I've learned more about myself and about what I want in a partner in 6 months than I learned in 5 years with Jessica. You see me, Natalie, the real me. And you like what you see, not because of what I have, but because of who I am." Natalie's eyes were already filling with tears. "I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow," Marcus continued, "but I'm asking you to build a future with me, to be my partner in life and in making a difference in the world." Yes," Natalie interrupted, laughing through her tears. "You didn't even finish asking, and the answer is yes." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that felt like a promise, like a beginning, like coming home. Across town, in a small Queens apartment, Jessica was finishing her shift at the department store. Her feet ached, her back hurt, and she smelled like the perfume counter where she'd been demonstrating fragrances all day. She took the subway home, a 40-minute ride that gave her too much time to think. Her life had stabilized, if you could call it that. She had a job, an apartment, food on the table. She was learning to live within her means, to appreciate small pleasures, to stop measuring her worth by other people's standards. It was a hard lesson, learned too late. Last month, she'd run into an old college friend at a coffee shop. They'd chatted awkwardly, and Jessica had found herself being honest for the first time in years. "I screwed up," she'd admitted. "I had something real, and I threw it away because I was too shallow to see its value." Her friend had been sympathetic, but hadn't offered any false hope. "The only thing you can do now is learn from it and do better next time." Jessica was trying. She'd stopped stalking Marcus's social media. She'd deleted Derek's number. She'd started therapy, working through her issues with self-worth and her unhealthy relationship with money and status. When she got home that evening, she saw a notification on her phone. Marcus Sullivan and Natalie Chun had announced their engagement. The photo showed them on a rooftop, the Manhattan skyline behind them, looking happier than Jessica had ever seen Marcus look during their entire marriage. For a moment, the old pain flared, jealousy, regret, the ache of loss. But then Jessica took a deep breath and clicked like on the post. It was the first time she'd interacted with anything related to Marcus in months. She added a comment, "Congratulations. I wish you both happiness." Then she closed the app and went to make herself dinner in her tiny kitchen. She wasn't happy, not yet, but she was learning, growing, becoming someone she could respect, even if it had taken losing everything to get there. 2 weeks later, Richard Sullivan hosted a gala at the family estate in the Hamptons to announce Marcus as his successor and to celebrate Marcus and Natalie's engagement. The guest list included the most influential people in New York: politicians, business leaders, philanthropists, old money families. Marcus stood with Natalie, his grandfather beside him, as Richard gave a speech about legacy, character, and the future of Sullivan Enterprises. "My grandson has proven himself not just as a businessman, but as a leader with vision and character," Richard said to the assembled crowd. "He understands that wealth comes with responsibility. That success means nothing if it doesn't lift others up. And he's found a partner who shares those values." Richard raised his glass. "To Marcus and Natalie, may they build a legacy even greater than the one they're inheriting." The crowd applauded, and Marcus felt the weight of generations settling on his shoulders. It was a heavy burden, but he was ready for it. The 5-year test had prepared him. Jessica's betrayal had taught him what really mattered. Natalie's love had shown him what genuine partnership looked like. As the party continued around them, Marcus pulled Natalie onto the dance floor. "Happy?" she asked. "Incredibly," Marcus replied. "Though I never would have predicted this is where I'd be a year ago." Life is funny that way. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best outcomes. Marcus thought about that. A year ago, he'd been devastated by Jessica's betrayal, heartbroken and humiliated. Today, he was engaged to the love of his life, about to take over $1 billion empire, and genuinely excited about his future. "You're right," he said. "If Jessica hadn't left me, I never would have reclaimed my identity. I never would have met you. I might have spent another 5 years, or 10, or 20, in a marriage with someone who never really saw me." "The universe works in mysterious ways," Natalie said. "Or maybe character always wins in the end," Marcus suggested. "My grandfather certainly thinks so." They danced until late, surrounded by well-wishers and friends. The champagne flowed, the orchestra played, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years: complete, genuine happiness. Across town, Derek Morrison sat alone in a modest apartment in Midtown, a far cry from his former Tribeca penthouse. His demotion at Morrison Media Group had been humiliating, but he was slowly working his way back up. He'd learned his lesson about judging people by superficial standards. He'd seen the announcement about Marcus and Natalie's engagement. Part of him felt envious. Marcus had everything Derek had once thought he had, but a bigger part felt relieved. He'd dodged a bullet with Jessica. If he'd married her, she would have left him the moment someone wealthier came along, just like she'd left Marcus. Character mattered. Derek was finally learning that lesson. The Sullivan Gala wound down around midnight. Guests departed in their luxury cars, already gossiping about the impressive event, the beautiful couple, the bright future ahead for Sullivan Enterprises. Marcus and Natalie stood on the same beach where Marcus had played as a child, looking out at the dark ocean, holding hands. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me, for loving me, for being exactly who you are." Natalie squeezed his hand. That's what real love is, Marcus. Not loving someone for what they can give you, but for who they are when all the pretense is stripped away. Marcus pulled her close, breathing in the salt air, feeling the weight of his family's legacy and the lightness of genuine love in equal measure. Somewhere in Queens, Jessica turned off her light and went to bed, dreaming of the life she'd lost and the person she was slowly learning to become. In the Hamptons, Marcus kissed his fiancée under the stars, grateful for every twist of fate that had brought him to this moment. The 5-year test was long over, but the lessons it had taught him about character, authenticity, and the true meaning of wealth would stay with Marcus Sullivan for the rest of his life. And as he stood with Natalie on that beach, Marcus realized something profound. He'd found something worth more than all the billions in his family's empire. He'd found someone who loved him for exactly who he was. And that, Marcus thought, was the greatest fortune of all.